Okay, before here for the Real Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame Facebook page.
Yay.
Whatever, work in progress. We did the myth, and we're busting myths that W has brainwashed people with over the last 10 years to believe, because Vince is trying to, well, you know, look good and destroy all the other companies to the new generation of kids coming up with his DVDs and everyone, and, you know, and initially make WCW look bad. So he looks good. He's the ultimate con man. Like, it's... Okay? And we were talking about the myth on how everyone just says WCW just took WF guys, and we broke that myth. And we were talking about how we broke the myth on how WCW never pushed anyone. And so I want to talk about how whatever you say, whether to be non-biased, they both did the exact same thing with their formats. Okay? Mick Foley and Steve Austin, most are very vocal on talking about WCW's format. Now this is the pre-Bischoff, because they were in mainly the pre-Bischoff era.
Bill Watts territory.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, they were on that border of WCW when Bischoff was coming into power. 94, you know, okay, 94, you know. And Mick talks about how in WCW, whatever the guy's spot was, that was their spot, and they hung on to it, and there was no room to grow. Okay, like he feuded with Sting over the world title, Vader over the world title, but he didn't get the world title. But anybody could feud over the world title and not get it. Not everyone gets it. Like look at Roddy Piper in the WF. You know, everybody in the WF feuded with Hogan and never got it. For unless a cup of coffee, you know, whatever. But that's not what I'm getting at. My point is he said that you had your spot. You know, Steve Austin said, you know, the horse Ric Flair has a spot I'm never gonna get. I'll feud with them, but I'm not going to get... Everybody has this... That's what they're pretty much saying. Okay. But they were... You got to remember, they were young then, and they were the mid-card. You got to remember how WCW had over 200 guys of talent. And they were bringing in international guys all the time. Everybody thinks, like, WCW just did the Cruiserweight thing in 95. You know, in Bishop. No, they were bringing in 93. They were doing those tours of Japan with Great Muta.
Muta's there.
Juice and Liger. They were bringing in all those lightweights when WF initially just never liked the small red. They never existed. But they were on WCW programming. Brian Pillman was a small luchador wrestling, you know. All them were.
I'm just saying, like...
And so, but my point is that you got to remember, they were mid-card then for WCW because of all the talent they had and the guys they were bringing in. So... WWF, they were dying after 92 in the steroid trial. They didn't have any money. They were very poor. Bankrupt, you know, Vince McMahon was, so he was promising guys, like we said, on opportunities. He couldn't offer big money. Okay, he offered opportunities if you could get built. That, you know, so it's so easy for Mick Foley and Steve Austin to say, oh, we never got anywhere in WCW with all that talent. What is the initial, what's the old cliche? Small fish in a big pond.
Or like 1,000 fish in a big pond.
You know, too much. Too much. Okay, that's not their fault. Bischoff could have held them in contract and they could have went nowhere, but he let them go. And he did, you know, okay. He was, and, so what I'm getting at is WF didn't have any talent. They were suffering. WCW was killing them in the ratings at this time with the NWA, who they didn't have their guys, like their next big... Okay, they just got the dumped leftovers from WCW when they made their cutting.
Rosie was like IC over there. Like.
Yeah, IC. They didn't have anyone. So, okay. Mick Foley and Steve Austin automatically get that top spot because they're rebuilding and they're starting that. It's a small... Okay, it's the opposite. They don't have any talent. It's very room for... So that's not fair to say. And also, what I'm getting at is this. They did the same thing. Mick Foley and Steve Austin became... hypocrites on who they hate.
Well, you know what's another
because, let me say this. I'm sorry, let me just say my piece and you can have whatever. Okay, they say, oh, I was mid-card, I never got anywhere. Okay, when they became the big stars of WF in 97 because they didn't have anyone and WF didn't have one, they had no choice. So and Vince didn't even like them, but he pushed them and made them, okay, yada, yada, yada. They stayed on top forever. And then look at all your guys that never were pushed. They became the Flairs. The guys that never went down. You know, same thing. They became who they hated. What was it forever? 97, 98, 99, 2000, 2001, 2002. Who were all their champions?
Stone
Cold, The Rock, Triple H. That's it. Mankind had it for a cup of coffee for like a total of
3 times.
3 days, like
Three
they threw-
title reigns.
Okay, it was
for
all
equivalents of a week.
Now look at WCW, DDP, Booker T, Sting, Hogan, whatever. You get the point. It's the same 5 guys. Now that's the same thing. Now WCW, Mick Foley and Steve Austin became those guys on top and held everyone down that they bitch at WCW for. They're hypocrites. Look at Al Snow, Val Venus, D'Lo Brown. All these guys were the mid card. Now the WF. They stayed the same guys, Rock, Austin, forever, all the way into 02. Right? Nobody got nobody got, same thing. Nobody got pushes. Val Venus would flirt with it. Everybody would just flirt. But it was the same initial guys, like Triple H and all them. Same 4, 5. You know, a couple of guys here and there. Undertaker maybe once in a while. Yeah. But he only had like 3 titles, in that, 10-year... Okay, because he didn't need it. But the point is that it's the same thing, but yet WWF manipulates people to turn the tide and say WWF never pushed anyone. They did the same thing. Steve Austin walked out on the WWF in 02 because he cried and bitched that he didn't like what they were doing because he was feuding with Flair, which was the same thing he did with Vince. Okay, but whatever. He just walked out unprofessionally without telling anyone in contract. And the same thing he did in WCW. He was supposed to go to a taping or whatever for an interview, and he was completely unprofessional. Eric Bischoff talked about how WCW called him to see where he's at, why he didn't show, and he said, tell those son of a bitches I'm not there, to his wife who was on the phone. He was completely unprofessional, and Bischoff didn't want to work with that, so he let him go. What's wrong with that? He has a trend of being unprofessional that no one talks about, that's not fair.
Yeah, I gotta add, though.
I'm sorry.
I
didn't mean to.
When you did that voice, that was awesome.
Oh.
He even did the voice.
Yeah.
That's how he sounds.
Yeah, but
all right.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
They bitch that they're in the mid card. They're only there for like 2 years. What the fuck do you want?
Yeah, you're there for you.
Like, what do you do? Like, you did not give no time for anything. And like, what do you expect when there's 200 people on the roster who've been there longer than you?
Egos.
And like, let's think about it. There's the big 3. Well, the big 2 because there was still like wasn't the big 3 till like about 99. There's only 3 companies. That's like nothing. Like, how can all these wrestlers get? All these wrestlers want the world title, but there's too many wrestlers and not enough companies.
Yeah, and
that's the problem because if he didn't fucking like destroy all the fucking these people
Vince, if he didn't destroy all those territories, yeah, they'd have. That's a very good point. Vince raped all the talent, destroyed all these companies in the '80s, and then that's why there's no work. And then WCW is around because of the NWA, and they're trying to, they're still there, and people don't realize these things, and that's not fair. Like, for everyone to just shit on that, it's the same thing.
So, yeah, you would be you know what, you'd be like a main eventer in like, if there's like a couple companies, but it's like, what fucking time? Like, you gotta wait.
And what people don't realize is like
everyone pay their dues over here.
And also,
you gotta pay your dues here.
We even talked about earlier in that other video. Okay, all these guys that bitch that didn't get their main event spot and all this stuff, Vince McMahon, they wouldn't even have a job on national TV if it wasn't for Bischoff, because Vince McMahon, he didn't want guys who curse or guys that don't look like clean muscle. All his guys were Sid Vicious, The Ultimate Warrior, Hogan, Luger, all these cookie cutter muscle. There would be no Mick Foleys. There would be no small luchadors like Chris Jericho. Eric Bischoff brought them from Japan and ECW, which ECW was not on national TV, lowest indie. Local TV on the East Coast. You know
the way you know anything about ECW.
You didn't know it, so they were built because Bischoff brought them all up. Nobody heard of any of them. So that's not for Bischoff. If it wasn't for him doing that, changing the business, bringing in all these different guys and making it, Vince would have just rolled right through with his muscle guys. So that is not fair for them to say, oh, Bischoff didn't, like, Vince would never wanted them.
There's another thing, though, about that, too. Now, Bischoff will let you in, and you can be who you are. If you go to WWE, you got to take steroids to get big or something, because, like, Chris Jericho looks like he's a fucking weightlifter now. Look at Rey Mysterio. He's like a jack midget.
Vince McMahon basically killed all these wrestlers because he made it where you're not going to get a world title unless you're jacked. That put the pressure on them to get bigger. Look at how Eddie Guerrero looked right before he died. Veins, all muscle. You could see all of them force themselves and pressured to get bigger. Benoit, yes, they're all victims to Vince McMahon's stereotype of not building smaller wrestlers.
And I don't care.
Or normal-sized men.
And I don't
you had to be a freak.
I don't care what their fucking channel says. SummerSlam '04, he was in the show. You cannot have a fucking show without the main event. I'm just saying.
Well, now on W24/7 they cut out that.
It's just like
existed.
It's like we have a pay-per-view without the world title being defended.
Yeah, it was.
What's the point?
Yeah, but the thing
it's like what are they gonna do with the old 4 Rumble? It's gonna be everything but the Rumble.
Yeah. So okay. WCW builds all these guys that Vince never would because they weren't Ultimate Warrior sized guys or Batista. And then once they're built, Vince McMahon takes them and then he lives off them for the next few years. He in '02, he lived off RVD, Eddie Guerrero, Booker T. Booker T was the main event in the '03 WrestleMania against Triple H. He lived off Goldberg in '03 against The Rock. All these other guys that everybody else made anyway. So how come no one brings up the post Monday Night War shit? That was him using all other companies' talent.
Yeah, like what the fuck?
He could, but he could though. No one says. Not that it's completely unfair. People are just so biased to WWE and they don't think before they talk. They don't have a mind of their own. They just watch the DVDs and are like, oh, well, Jericho said this, so he's automatically right. You got to remember, Jericho is a fan as well as being a wrestler. So if he grew up watching the WWF and he loves it, he's gonna be biased and he's a mark. He's a mark, so he's going to be biased. He never liked WCW to begin with. He went there because WWF never wanted him. Then he jumped to WWF when he was built, and then he's like, oh, now
you want me.
Now you want me. And so that's not fair to Bischoff, who gave them their chances when they'd be in Japan.
He'd be stuck in Mexico.
Or in ECW, when ECW would never go national till 2000.
He'd be stuck in Mexico.
So that's where they would be.
Honest to God knows who.
Yeah, and even guys like Owen Hart, okay? In the 80s, Owen Hart, everybody thinks the Blue Blazer came in 99. No. Blue Blazer was a gimmick that they made up in like 88 because any small wrestler had to be a novelty gimmick. You couldn't just be a regular sized guy in WWF before the Bischoff era. So they made him the cheesy superhero Blue Blazer, and that was like 88. You could look it up. Because he was a luchador. Owen Hart actually originally was a cruiserweight that did Hurricane Run, and he was a cheat, and they gave him a dumb Blue Blazer gimmick in the 80s. Okay? Vince McMahon, that's how he does it. Nowadays, he has all gimmicks. He has his one giant. He has Khali. One giant. He's got the Flash Funk ripoff, the Funkasaurus, the Freak. He's got one luchador, Rey Mysterio, like a novelty. You can't have more than one. One of each.
Well, no.
He always has the farmers, the Hick farmers, whether it's the Godwins, what's the family?
The
Wyatt, the Hillbilly Jim. He does the same thing over and over. Same bullshit.
And now Ray's on his way out, so he's got Sin Cara.
Yeah, he doesn't have to have his one luchador. And so, okay. For proof, I'm reading from Mick's book. Again, I've been using it in the videos to show that I'm not just being biased. It's true. WWF was dying after the stare. They were completely bankrupt after all that. Nobody wanted to see Hogan anymore. And okay, so look, here's Mick saying, so I guess my decision to meet with the World Wrestling Federation came down to two simple things. Physical and financial well-being. The Federation at that time, however, was far from wrestling utopia. Crowds were down, morale was down, and paychecks were down. I had heard horror stories from the road about Canadian trips where guys hadn't even made enough to meet their road expenses. Wrestlers were at one another's throats, and there were deep divisions among groups of guys in the dressing room. Shane Douglas, who had left ECW months earlier with high hopes of the WWF chances, was now miserable. Abort mission was one of Shane's more pleasant messages as he pleaded with his longtime friend not to follow down the same path, meaning Mick, that he had taken. In truth, Shane was at least partly to blame for his Federation woes, as he had let Vince change him from a dynamic, intense franchise, the original franchise character who said everything he wanted to say. Shane Douglas in ECW, he dropped the NWA belt down and he said, fuck Flair and the old tradition. We're ECW, we're Extreme, where he's going to bring it into the 90s and the modern. That was Shane, that guy who... And he let Vince turn him into Dean Douglas, your teacher, which they eventually redid with Matt Stryker because they have no ideas. Vince is just... They're not... Same thing. Yeah, they redid that. Okay? So... He let him change him from the franchise into the monotone, drippy Dean. Now, don't get me wrong, a guy with a good vocabulary who thinks he's smarter than anyone can be annoying. But it was not exactly the type of thing that would inspire me to buy a ticket. Oh, hey, Jimmy, I was watching wrestling and there was this really smart guy on there. Let's go buy a ticket. It was not a conversation that I envisioned kids around the country having. No, I wasn't going to fall into the same trap that Shane had. I was too smart for that. Vince was going to get Cactus Jack the way I wanted him, or else, damn it, he wasn't going to get him at all. That's okay. So you understand my point that WF is just, it lived off its old 80s formula, got old. Bischoff brought it into the new. He brought it to the modern 90s, what people wanted to see. Well, ECW did, but they weren't seen. On the national stage, Bischoff made it more real. Okay? People say, oh, he took Hall and Nash first. Well, first of all, Hall was Razor Ramon, a dumb gimmick that they recopied with Carlito. He wasn't the stature of Scott Hall. He was a mid-card with the Intercontinental title, goofy gimmick.
Sometimes.
Okay, not so famous considering no one was watching the WF at that time. That'd be like if I asked somebody in 05, oh, you ever hear Carlito?
I'm not gonna lie.
Because no one watches wrestling. How are they gonna know?
Kid, I thought Razor Ramon was like a wrestler from like the 60s.
Well, because it was so cheesy and out of date.
I didn't know it was the same guy.
But do you get what I'm saying, though? Considering the time period of the... Okay, people started watching in the mainstream of wrestling. It popped the boom period, they call it, from 90 because of Nitro. So how are people going to be watching in 93 Razor Ramon when it's like now? No one's watching. The ratings are like 2 million. No one's watching. So how are you going to know who's Razor Ramon? So nobody ever says, oh, yeah, Razor and Diesel. They say Hall and Nash. Because that's where they were mostly made big. Because Bischoff let them just be real people. That was more appealing to a whole audience. They were the ones destroying cars, getting arrested in '96 at the NWO, and because they were invading the company, and you thought they were for WF, getting arrested. They just ripped that off in Austin. A couple years later, you know. So what are we talking about here? They say, oh, he didn't make Hall and Nash. Like, oh, and he made Hogan again because Hogan was completely stale. Dragged out like we talked about on the other video from 84 to 93. It was completely dead. The ratings were, you know, he was looking for his replacement for years. Ultimate Warrior busted. Luger, we were talking about the other video. Okay, completely dead. Hogan's career would have been ruined. Bischoff came up with the genius idea. Well, let's make you heel and completely refresh you. Genius. So, initially, that Hogan is his. It's a different, see?
And then,
so it's not fair to say who made who. You know.
You actually, like, think about it. You make shit, no one makes anything.
Oh.
It's kind of like either the fans like you or they don't. And if they don't, you're fucked.
Yeah, and okay, Steve Austin, Stone Cold. First of all, Paul Heyman made that in ECW. And another thing is Vince didn't even want that. He wanted the Ringmaster. And I wanted to go to video if we could, Brittany. Can we go to video?
Is it okay?
Yeah.
Is it okay? Yeah. Do I have permission, Mommy? Please, Mommy? No. I want to go to the before they started copying Nitro 95 while they were kicking their ass with the first Nitros. Okay. Let's go to 95, 96 Monday Night Raw that no one's watching. Where it still looks like 1985. This is 1995. Mid into the 90s and it still looks like 84. Gorilla Monsoon. The whole look of the red, white, and blue robes. The whole thing is 80s like it's 84. And we're into grunge and metal and completely out of date. Jeff Jarrett's a goofy country singer. All dumb gimmicks. No one's watching. Road Dogg's the roadie. Oh, great, clever. Sean, if he left, they're buried. Let's just put. Okay.
They got a fucking.
Let's skim this.
They got a biker guy.
You got the $1 Million Man still there. And where is he? 84. Okay. Look at this. Does this? Oh yeah, this doesn't look like. Okay, you got a garbage man. That's That's Vince before copying off Bischoff. Duke the Dumpster, a garbage man. Okay, that's great. And look at Raw in 95.
No, we got a guy who's a jobber. We got a guy who should be a jobber. No, we got a guy who's a jobber. And we got a guy who should be. No, what the fuck did I say the other day?
I don't know,
It
but
was like, wait. We got a garbage man who should be a jobber.
and a bad jobber should be a garbage man. Okay,
That's what I said.
at 95, Raw is an hour because wrestling was dead and not popular. They couldn't get 2 hours. Okay, it's an hour long, right? Which means it's 40 minutes of commercials. They waste an hour show on a jobber who's not even on the roster. That's a waste of airtime. Bischoff cut that out of the formula. Okay, this is still the old, like, what is this? 82? It's pathetic. How are you gonna tell me? Oh yeah, Vince is a genius. Without Bischoff, this is what you'd be watching. Okay,
You know, man,
that's
I
unfair.
have to do a tugboat bullshit here. I don't know.
Look at this. Oh, okay. That's great. Yeah.
You know, that's good TV, I guess. You know.
Okay,
People
moving
like
on.
garbage man.
Okay, Look at this. Scott Taylor, who later becomes Scotty Too Hotty, is Scott Taylor. And he looks like it's 80. He's dressed like it's 84. Which I like 84. I'm just saying it's 96 here.
Hey guys, look, it's Stone Cold.
Yeah, okay. The Ringmaster. That's what Vince wanted. The boring wrestler, the Ringmaster. That's what Stone Cold was till he had to copy off Nitro. And look at it. This is 96. This, I don't know. You're telling me that you wouldn't think this is 84, Brittany? You didn't know?
Yeah.
Look at it, it's completely stale. The people, look at that guy can't even find his seat. It's the light of the living dead. They're zombies.
Dude, I think this is The Walking Dead.
It's a fucking joke.
I think this is The Walking Dead.
Like, where's my dentures? They're more interested in fighting their fucking dentures than the actual initial match. Because Austin's complete nothing here. And this is 1996 when NWO was kicking their fucking. They just copied. This is 96.
This is 96?
This is 1996.
I thought it was like
No.
76.
This is what Vince. Yeah. Oh.
There's Baron Von Ruthless.
No.
You don't only create a winner, you create a monster. At the Royal Rumble, when I tossed everybody over the top rope,
That's what Vince wants.
I get right into WrestleMania against the World Wrestling Federation champ. That's what I do.
Okay, completely stale, boring. Austin's like that's garbage. Everybody forgets about this part. You know why? Because no one was watching wrestling at this time until WCW made it. Gee, they didn't copy everything. What the like? How are people gonna tell me? Okay. We got more 96 here. Oh! Here's where, when Hall and Nash jumped to WCW, Vince McMahon is so uncreative and stupid, he thought he could take Kane and make a fake Diesel and a fake Hall no one would notice. There's your fake Razor Ramon.
Because that looks like Skull.
And there's your Diesel, which is Glenn Jacobs, who later, he was Isaac Yankem, the dentist for Jerry Lawler. A dentist. And then he was Diesel. And then they got lucky with Kane because of Russo, who everyone hates. And Hunky Talk Man, why he's there,
He's Elvis.
yeah.
And we got a guy who thinks he's a
Okay, so you get my initial point on how without Bischoff, no one's watching wrestling and the WF is out of business.
No, let's folks. We gotta stop.
And he got lucky that
folks,
Mick.
we
I'm
gotta
sorry.
stop and think about what the fuck we just saw, because I'm pretty sure my eyes are bleeding.
That was 1996, people. I'm not lying to you. That you've been duped by Vince,
You've been
and
duped.
you obviously
You've
haven't
been-
watched the timeline.
You've been
of how
brosied. You've been duped, the dumpster brosied.
the Ringmaster. Okay,
A
so
garbage man.
I think I pretty much made my point here, didn't I?
This is
I think we're good. Can we kill this myth now?
we can kill
Or
the man.
how much do I have to pull out? Like, how much bullshit? Look at all these videos. Yeah, okay, see how these tapes?
They're coming. The walls are breaking down, Jericho.
Look at that. Okay, I have every wrestling footage. Here's Nitro 12, 15, 97. I have everything. How much to look at this? How much do I need? How much do I need to prove? Okay? I think I made the fucking point. These whole two shells. They go,
I think you should show them what Jim Cornette thinks about it. Thinks about the fake Diesel.
we'll get to that on another X. Yeah.
Right there.
But we're gonna move on to another topic. You know,
Why are we gonna move on to another topic? It's already there.
you want?
Dude,
to,
I want to hear Jim Cornette, dude. I think they want to hear it. You guys want to hear
I
Cornette?
just
Come
don't
on.
want to drag out too long.
Dude, it's already like an hour. So, like, who gives a shit at this point?
When I get to Tulsa and some of the guys say, Nash and Hall are coming back? I'm like, what are you talking about? Well, I think this was right when the website first went up. You might know this, 97-ish or late 96-ish, or somewhere or another they announced this news on Livewire or some shit, that Diesel and Razor are coming back. I said, I was just at the owner of the company's house yesterday. I'm on the creative team. We were writing television. No, I know nothing of this. And suddenly he's announced to the world. And so all weekend we're like, what the fuck? And I called, I don't even know it, Bruce. Bruce was there. Bruce knew. I talked to Bruce on Sunday. He said, oh yeah, we're going to do this. And when I heard the idea, he'd gotten up that morning and said, I own the rights to Diesel and Razor Ramon, so we're just going to have them.
And he got
the
names are nothing. We don't have the guys
to be Razor Ramon, and he got No, Kane, Glenn Jacobs.
Glenn Jacobs.
To be Diesel. But no, here's the story. Even though this is 1997, you don't mind me.
No.
I said, well, okay, how are we going to do this? He basically wanted me to teach them how to be Razor Ramon and Diesel.
When they're clearly
I
on
had to
Nitro.
go into the TV studio and
Said on the
have
same night.
Dave Benoit or one of the guys there make me tape. I said, give me 5 or 6 Razor Ramon and 5 or 6
That's
Diesel
awesome.
matches
That's
so
why,
that,
that's why I wanted it.
you know, I can make notes and tell these guys. I watched them at home, wrote down the moves. Nash, that's where I got the line 6 moves. I wrote down every move that Kevin Nash did, every idiosyncrasy he did in the ring, and I got to 6, and that was with the hair flip. The back elbow, the side knees in the deal, the fucking flipper punch, the fucking hair.
Fucking hair.
Side slam.
Oh, and there's Kane as Isaac Yankem, the dentist. Another genius idea by Vince. Oh, and here's Eddie Guerrero in the Latino World Order. Oh, Latino Heat that Vince invented.
Yeah, man, he must be really good because he stretched big from a different company.
See, there's Eddie getting all the airtime in the world on national TV, on TNT, on Nitro. Oh yeah, but he's a nobody in WCW, you fucking assholes. All Vince did was take him and then put Latino Heat on it.
And then he heard Lars.
Well, Eddie bitches he didn't get a push. He got all the airtime in the world. You know what? He was in that automobile accident where he was out for a year. How are you gonna push a guy who's always on drugs or in a fucking car accident?
Who can't walk?
What the fuck?
kind of
All you people have been brainwashed by dumb DVDs. Did you even watch them, like, at the time? Okay, Eddie, ladies man, same
He's
thing.
getting laid tonight, but he didn't get a push. He's gonna push tonight. He is. He's gonna push tonight, motherfucker. The fuck out.
So they do the whole thing with China and Jericho, even on that WCW era, that Eddie Guerrero DVD. He's like, oh yeah, Vince let Eddie be Eddie. What are you talking about? This isn't Eddie. So bad. Everybody hates him because of Vince is a fucking scumbag liar.
Look at Parker. He's like, yo, he's doing the
LaParca does the exact same dance, which I love. Silver King. Okay.
top heel.
You pretty much get my point that, oh, Eddie's, yeah, he's a big nobody, getting 20 minutes airtime here. It's that guy that's actually one of Eddie Guerrero's friends in real life who's not involved in wrestling. And Bischoff let him on the show to be his bodyguard. Oh, but he's an, you know.
He's like Spinback.
Yeah, you know, but oh.
I like how we showed the Dennis.
For 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Well, we got it in. Snuck it in.
You see his face?
Alright, but you pretty much get my point that Vince McMahon is a liar, and he manipulated everyone to believe, but if you watched it, okay, you clearly know that WCW did everything first, and then in 2000, what did Vince McMahon live off of? Eddie Guerrero. The same shit here, done in 99. Okay, who else does he live off of? Jericho. All that shit that he did in WCW, feuding with Goldberg and all that. So, okay, let's just skim this. Like, Vince McMahon is a liar. Okay?
Personally, I feel that when
And
characters go out and
I wanted to
reveal
show
too
this
much
Bischoff
and
interview to
let
initially
everybody
show,
behind the
but I was
curtain, so to
afraid it'd be
speak,
too
that,
time consuming, but
you
would
lose
it be
some of that
okay if
mystique.
we showed
I
this?
think it's a mistake.
Yeah.
You ever share that view with Vince? Because Vince clearly evolved 180 degrees away from that. At one time, that was the philosophy of the company. And then, coincidentally, when we started this show in 1997, Vince started to see the value in allowing his people to talk about how they felt and not how the company wanted them to feel.
To answer your first question, no, I've never had that conversation with Vince. It's never come up in any of our conversations. And I'm not suggesting that wrestlers don't come out of character. What I'm suggesting is that the depth of detail that they sometimes go into is not necessarily always helpful to the overall picture.
You clearly still think like an owner. You ran the WCW. Vince was your greatest competitor. Vince was a guy that you didn't hesitate for a second to slag and say, we're at war with him. What's it like working for him now?
I enjoy it. You know, Vince is a very focused, very intense personality that demands a lot of himself and all the people around him. To a certain degree, he's a perfectionist. That's been my experience with him. But I like that
Is
environment.
it difficult for you, though, knowing that at one time you guys were on the same level and now you work for him? You don't work behind the scenes, you are a performer. And I think anyone who watches you perform would say you're a great performer. But right now, you're one of the guys that used to work with you and you're not on an even level with Vince.
It doesn't bother me, and I don't really look at it that way. You know, I looked at this as an opportunity. You know, I'm still doing a lot of other things. I've got other projects that I'm managing. I've got other goals that I'm achieving outside of my relationship with Vince. So in terms of the way I look at myself, I'm very comfortable with the role that
Do you want to go back behind the scenes? Would you like to book the show? Would you like to write for the show? Would you like to do more of the things that you used to do, even away from the business of running it, which I know that you are hugely burdened by, but the actual scripting of the show?
Not really. You know, people don't realize just how difficult of a job that really is. It's a full-time job. You know, it's one thing to sit at home and get on the internet and throw a few ideas around, and, you know, what you would do if you were Vince McMahon or if you were Eric Bischoff, you know, when I was running WCW. But the truth of the matter is, that is a full time and a half job, and you have to be dedicated to it 24/7. And I've lived through that part of my life, and I enjoyed it. I have the best of both worlds right now. If I have an idea that I'm passionate about, that I think will work, I can knock on just about anybody's door I want to knock on, sit down and have that conversation.
So are you then happy, because from how I understand it, you actually made a bid on WCW. You took a shot at purchasing the company when you were out before Vince eventually purchased it. Are you happy that you didn't get it now? Because what you're saying essentially is that you love where you are right now.
No, I'm not happy that didn't happen, because that would have been a whole different situation. I would have been in an equity position at that time, and you know, I really wanted to acquire WCW, which is why we made the attempt in the first place. But I moved on. You know, that was a couple of years ago, and once that deal fell through, once it became apparent that we weren't going to be able to acquire that property from Time Warner, I closed the book on that part of my life and moved on.
See, one of the things that I see with wrestlers, because it seems like almost everybody leaves for a time, either they left the Federation or they left WCW, and many guys are out of it for a time, but they are drawn back because it's in their blood. If Vince McMahon ever left for a time, if WWE went under, you know he would be back, because he's a wrestling guy. But I don't see you as being a wrestling guy. What brought you back?
But I think I am a wrestling guy at heart. You know, there's a passion for what I do. I love being in front of that crowd, getting them to react. That's a very empowering position to be in. It's satisfying. It's ego. It's all of the things that drive any performer. And I think you can say the same thing about musicians. That's probably the same reason why rock stars never really retire. It's the same reason why Kiss has been on a farewell tour for the last 4 years, because they never want to say goodbye. It's too addicting.
So part of it is the ego, and people use that as in a negative way, but it doesn't have to be negative. The ego is what allows us to get out of bed and to carry our head up high. Some say that it can be out of control. When I met you 5 years ago, I thought that you were a guy who was driven to some extent by his ego. Was that a fair comment?
Sure, still is. I am driven by my ego, and I'm proud to say I'm grateful for the fact that I'm driven by my ego. My ego demands that I provide a very good lifestyle for my family. My ego demands of me that I provide unique opportunities for my children. My ego demands that I live in a certain lifestyle. So absolutely, I'm driven by my ego.
So given the fact that you are concerned by how people see you, you enjoy people watching you, how much does it bother you that people look at you and know that WCW failed and that you were one of the guys that was running it at that time? How much was that?
No, you're wrong. I was not one of the guys that was running it at that time.
But when the WCW was on its way down, you were dismissed from your position, right?
Two different things.
Okay.
I take a position that the reason WCW failed is because I left the company in 1999. Here are the facts that you haven't heard, because there's been a number of wrestlers that would come out and people associated with WCW would come out and position my departure in a number of different ways. None of them had any idea what was really going on. None of them were involved in the decision or the meetings or the situation leading up to it. The fact of the matter is, I knew WCW was in a bad position as early as mid-1998. When, by the way, we were still very, very profitable. My position was very secure within that company. And in fact, I could get away with just about anything that I wanted to get away with as an executive in that company because I was so successful. The fact of the matter is, when Turner decided that they were going to merge with Time Warner, all of a sudden, key executives at my level and way above my level started changing the way they did business. It went from being a very entrepreneurial-based culture within Turner, which is what it had always been up until that point, to a very bureaucratic type of culture. Everybody at my level and above was trying to become what they felt their peers at Time Warner were. And it became impossible to get anything done. When accountants started telling me how to write my show, I knew that we were in trouble. And what I did, quite honestly, it was a mistake. It was a miscalculation on my part. But I tried to muscle my way through the quagmire. And, you know, I remember Harvey Schiller telling me at one point, president of TBS Sports, Eric, you're successful, but your shoulders aren't big and aren't broad enough to fight that fight. And he was right.
I got to talk to you about some guys who have big, broad shoulders who had some things to say about what it was like back then at WCW. We'll do that when we return.
You get the point is that everybody thinks like, oh, you know, WF1 or something. No, they merged. Turner sold it, pulled the plug on it. They didn't sell it to Bischoff.
AOL shut it down.
AOL killed it, just like they just killed it because they didn't want wrestling on their network. That's it. And they didn't sell it to Bischoff because they hated him back when he was with Turner. You know? And they hated him because he wasn't a douchebag suit walking around like I was saying. Yeah, yeah. And they didn't like it. Eric becomes this fall guy, like it's ridiculous. And so he wanted to buy it so he can keep it going, but they purposely under his nose sold it to Vince for nothing. To get it just so they don't sell it to him because they hated him because of when he was Turner's boy and everything, and they hated it they were jealous. And that's it. So nobody won anything. It would be if that didn't happen, WCW would just be going on right now, and they'd just be constantly battling for it. It'd be just never end.
Never-ending war.
That's it. And so people think like, okay, the invasion storyline where Vince says, I beat WCW. That was the fucking storyline. All he did was just buy the name after they fucking pulled the plug on it and sold it to him. It didn't go out of business. $1 billion company doesn't go out of business, okay?
It didn't happen.
And so this is I know we talked about this in the videos, but I want to make that point to cut all bullshit by this crap, all these lies. And okay, so this was the extras feature on on that, and I think I pretty much broke the myths, didn't I?
Stay in school, kids.
So that's it, and we'll see you on the next topic.
Stay in school, kids.